September 5th, 1717, he freed 100 slaves and asked them to join as equals. 2 months later, they all drowned.
September 5th, 1717. Off the West African coast, near Whydah. The air in Sam Bellamy's cabin tasted of gunpowder and rum. Lamplight threw shadows across the faces of 18 men packed into a space meant for 6. Outside, waves slapped against the hull of the Whydah, a ship that 6 months earlier had carried 500 enslaved people in chains. Now it carried their liberator. The vote had finished. Bellamy's quartermaster, Richard Noland, counted hands again. Twice. The math was close. Too close. 93 for selling, Noland said. His voice was steady, but his hands shook. 87 for freeing. In the cargo hold below them, 112 African people sat in darkness. They didn't know their fate was being decided by 6 votes. They didn't know that in the next hour, some would walk free. They didn't know that others would become pirates. They didn't know that this single decision, this moment of conscience on a stolen slave ship, would kill them all. The thing that was supposed to save them guaranteed their destruction. To understand how this happened, we need to go back 18 months. February 23, 1689. Hiddesley, Devon, England. Samuel Bellamy was born into nothing. His father worked land he'd never own. His mother died when he was 7. By 14, he was at sea. By 26, he was in love with a woman whose family would never accept him. Her name was Maria Hallett. Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Wealthy family. Beautiful. 15 years old when they met. Bellamy was 26, a poor sailor with calloused hands and no prospects. Her parents forbade the marriage. The math was simple. She had land. She had money. She had a future. He had nothing. Bellamy made her a promise. "I'll come back rich." The Spanish plate fleet had wrecked off Florida's coast. Millions in gold scattered across the ocean floor. Bellamy and another sailor, Palsgrave Williams, sailed south to find it. They spent 8 months diving. They found nothing. Sitting in a tavern in Port Royal, Jamaica, Bellamy did the calculation. He was 27 years old. He'd wasted a year. He was poorer than when he started. Maria was waiting. "If I can't find treasure," he told Williams, "I'll steal it." They stole a sloop. They recruited 30 men. On a humid night in January 1716, Sam Bellamy became a pirate. What happened next was extraordinary. In 12 months, Bellamy captured over 50 vessels. 50. Most pirates took 5 or 6 ships in their entire careers. Bellamy averaged 1 per week. But numbers don't capture what made him different. Most pirates were democratic by necessity. Cruel captains got murdered. Bellamy was democratic by conviction. His crew voted on everything. Targets, routes, punishments, share distributions. Every man got equal shares. The carpenter got the same cut as the quartermaster. The musician got the same as the navigator. Even the ship's cook, usually the lowest position, got full shares. This wasn't generosity. It was philosophy. Bellamy gave speeches. Long ones. Eloquent ones. His crew would later report that he could talk for an hour without notes, pacing the deck, his long black hair, which earned him the nickname Black Sam, whipping in the wind. One captured merchant captain recorded Bellamy's words. "Damn ye! You are a sneaking puppy, and so are all those who will submit to be governed by laws which rich men have made for their own security. They vilify us, the scoundrels do, when there is only this difference. They rob the poor under the cover of law, and we plunder the rich under the protection of our own courage." He saw himself as a revolutionary, a man rebelling against a system designed to keep poor men poor. He called his crew free men, and meant it. By January 1717, Bellamy commanded 180 pirates across 3 ships. His flagship was the Sultana, 8 guns. Respectable but not exceptional. Then he spotted the Whydah Gally. February 26, 1717. The Windward Passage, between Cuba and Hispaniola. The Whydah was built in London in 1715 for one purpose: the slave trade. 300 tons. 102 feet long. 28 cannons. Its name came from Whydah, the West African port where it loaded human cargo. Captain Lawrence Prince commanded her. He'd just completed the triangle: London to West Africa to Jamaica. 500 enslaved people purchased on the African coast. 500 people sold in Kingston. £10,000 profit. The return voyage carried the money: gold coins, silver bars, indigo, sugar, jewelry stripped from African chiefs, gems. The total value, somewhere between £20,000 and £30,000. In today's money, $7 million. Maybe 12 million. The estimates vary. It was the single richest prize in pirate history. Prince saw Bellamy's Sultana on the horizon and tried to run. But the Whydah was heavy, bloated with treasure. The Sultana was light and fast. Bellamy chased for 3 days. 72 hours. Prince couldn't escape, couldn't fight. On the 3rd day, he surrendered without firing a shot. Bellamy boarded. He gave Prince's crew the standard offer: join us or take a boat to shore. Most joined. The treasure was too tempting. The stories of Bellamy's fairness too convincing. Bellamy walked the Whydah's deck, touched the railings, examined the cannons. The ship was perfect, vast, heavily armed, large enough for his growing crew. In the hold, he found the shackles. Chains bolted to the walls. Leg irons in piles. The ceiling was low, 4 feet high, so enslaved people couldn't stand. Bloodstains darkened the wood. The smell hadn't left. 500 people had suffered here. 4 weeks. In darkness. Some had died, their bodies thrown overboard. Now it was empty. Bellamy made his decision immediately: tear it all out. Over the next week, his crew ripped out every chain, every shackle, every restraint. They burned the slave deck and rebuilt it. They added bunks. They mounted more cannons. The Whydah Gally became the Whydah. A slave ship became a pirate flagship. The irony was complete. Spring and summer, 1717. Bellamy sailed the Caribbean. His fleet grew to 4 ships. His crew swelled past 200 men. The treasure accumulated. Every captured merchant added to the hoard: Spanish silver, Portuguese gold, English jewelry, Dutch gems. By August, Bellamy's share alone was worth £3,000. Enough to buy an estate. Enough to marry Maria. Enough to live like a gentleman for the rest of his life. He was 28 years old. He'd gone from poverty to wealth in 18 months. Then, in late August, his fleet approached the African coast, near Whydah, the port that gave the Whydah its name. They spotted a slave ship. The ship's name is lost to history. The captain's name is lost. The company that owned it is lost. Even the exact number of people in its hold is uncertain. Records say approximately 100 souls. Some accounts say 112. Others say 98. What we know, it was British or Portuguese. It was heading west. It carried African people in chains. Men, women, children, packed in the hold the same way 500 others had been packed into the Whydah the year before. Bellamy's fleet intercepted it easily. The slave ship surrendered immediately. No chase. No fight. Pirates terrified slave traders. Bellamy boarded. He went below deck. He saw what he'd torn out of the Whydah 7 months earlier. The chains. The low ceiling. The darkness. The faces. He came back up. His crew was celebrating. Easy prize. The captains were calculating. 100 enslaved people. Roughly £20 per person. £2,000 total. Split among 200 pirates, £10 each. 3 months' wages for an hour's work. We take them to Jamaica, his quartermaster said. Sell them. Split the money. This was standard procedure. Every pirate did it. Henry Morgan did it. Blackbeard did it. Even the good pirates, the ones who didn't torture prisoners, sold slaves for profit. Bellamy said nothing. He walked to his cabin, closed the door. For 2 hours, the crew waited. When Bellamy emerged, he called a council. In pirate democracy, major decisions required a vote. Every man had a voice. This was the rule. Bellamy made his case. "We fight tyranny," he said. "We fight rich men who make laws to protect their wealth. We fight the system that keeps poor men in chains. Chains of poverty, chains of servitude, chains of law. How," he asked, "can we claim to be free men if we enslave others?" The silence was total. "We say we're better than them," Bellamy continued. His voice was rising. "We say the merchants and the traders and the governors are hypocrites. They talk of law and civilization while they rob the poor. But what are we if we sell these people? What's the difference between us and them?" A voice from the back. £2,000 is the difference. Laughter. Nervous laughter, but laughter. Bellamy didn't smile. "We've taken £30,000 in 9 months. We're the richest pirates on earth. We don't need £2,000. We need to decide who we are." He let that settle. "I propose we free them. All of them. We remove their chains. We give them boats to reach shore. And," he paused, "we offer them the choice to join us. As equals. Full crew members. Equal shares. Equal votes." The room exploded. "They're not sailors. We can't trust them. They don't speak English. It's £2,000. Bellamy raised his hand. The room quieted. Not immediately, but it quieted. "Vote," he said. The debate lasted 4 hours. 90 men argued for selling. The money was too good. Times were dangerous. Royal Navy patrols were increasing. They might not have many more prizes. £2,000 could be the difference between comfort and poverty if they had to retire soon. 87 men argued for freeing. Some agreed with Bellamy's philosophy. Others simply liked the idea of the story, the pirate who freed slaves. It was romantic, legendary, the kind of tale that lived forever. Some didn't care either way but voted with Bellamy out of loyalty. At midnight on September 5, 1717, the vote concluded. 93 for selling, 87 for freeing. Bellamy had lost. He stood. He looked at his quartermaster. He looked at his crew. These were the men he'd sailed with for 18 months. The men who'd made him rich. The men who'd followed him through storms and battles. He thought about overruling them. He was captain. On most pirate ships, captains had absolute authority in battle. Some extended that authority to other decisions. But Bellamy had built his reputation on democracy, on equality, on the idea that every man's voice mattered. If he overruled the vote, he was a hypocrite. He was everything he claimed to oppose. The math was simple. Honor the democracy or abandon it. He sat down. Then he stood again. "I'm calling a second vote," he said. "Not on freeing them. On something else." The room stirred. "I propose this. I will personally forfeit my share of the next 5 prizes. All of it. The money goes to the crew, distributed equally among everyone else. In exchange, we free these people. We give them the choice to join or leave. My money for their freedom." The room went silent. 5 prizes. At the Whyda's rate of capture, that was 5 weeks. At their average haul, that was Bellamy's cut of perhaps £3,000. £3,000 to free 100 people. £30 per person. It was more than they'd get selling them. "Vote," Bellamy said. This time it wasn't close. 147 for freeing. 33 against. The decision was made. September 5, 1717. Early morning. Bellamy's crew removed the chains. They brought the enslaved people on deck. 112 people blinking in sunlight they hadn't seen in weeks. They were terrified. In their experience, pirates killed everyone. Threw bodies overboard. These people had survived the Middle Passage only to be captured by pirates. They expected death. Through a translator, one of Bellamy's crew spoke Portuguese, which some West Africans learned in coastal trading. Bellamy explained. "You're free. We're not selling you. We're not keeping you. We're giving you boats to reach shore." Confusion. Disbelief. This had to be a trick. "Or," Bellamy continued, "you can join us. As pirates. Full crew members. Same pay as everyone else. Same food. Same quarters. Same vote in decisions." The translator repeated it 3 times. The words didn't make sense. Bellamy had his crew demonstrate. He called an African man forward, randomly, just pointed at someone. Had him stand next to a white crew member. "Same," Bellamy said. He gave each man a silver coin. "Same." He pointed to the crew quarters. "Same." He mimed eating. "Same." Some of the freed people began to understand. Most chose the boats. 78 people took the small vessels and headed to shore. Back to Africa. Back to uncertainty, but away from ships and chains and white men. 34 chose to stay. 28 men. 6 women. They'd been warriors before capture. Traders. Sailors. People who understood that the ocean offered opportunities that land didn't. Or perhaps they simply understood that joining the strongest power nearby was survival. Bellamy kept his word. The new crew members got hammocks in the same quarters as everyone else. They ate the same food. When the next vote came, a decision about which direction to sail, they voted. Some white crew members grumbled. Most accepted it. This was Bellamy's ship. His rules. Over the next 2 months, the African crew members learned sailing. Some picked it up fast. Others struggled. But they worked. They fought when battles came. When a Spanish merchantman resisted in October, 3 of the African pirates boarded with everyone else. 1 was wounded. He was treated by the ship's surgeon. The same surgeon who treated everyone. In November, Bellamy captured a Dutch ship carrying sugar and slaves. He freed those slaves too. 16 people. Gave them the same choice. 8 joined. By November 1717, Bellamy commanded 42 African pirates. Out of 200 total crew, that was 1 in 5. An integrated crew. Mixed race. Democratic. 148 years before America would abolish slavery, Sam Bellamy's pirate ship practiced racial equality. Not perfectly. Not without tension. But it worked. November 15, 1717. Bellamy made an announcement. "We're sailing north." His crew was surprised. North meant cold. North meant away from prizes. The Caribbean was where the money was. "Why?" his quartermaster asked. "Cape Cod," Bellamy said. "Massachusetts." He didn't explain further. But his oldest crew members understood. Maria Hallett. The woman he'd promised to return to. The woman who'd been waiting for 2 years. Bellamy had done it. He'd become rich. 30,000 pounds in the widow's hold. Maybe more. Enough to buy an estate. Enough to marry her. Enough to prove her parents wrong. He'd promised to come back wealthy. He was keeping that promise. The African crew members didn't know any of this. They just knew they were sailing to a place called Massachusetts. They'd never heard of it. They didn't know what winter in New England meant. They'd come from tropical Africa to tropical Caribbean. They'd never experienced cold. They trusted Bellamy. He'd freed them. He'd given them equality. If he said sail north, they'd sail north. They didn't know they were sailing to their deaths. The journey took 4 months. November to March. Through winter seas. The Whydah wasn't built for cold water. It was a tropical ship. The crew wasn't prepared either. The African pirates especially. They'd never seen ice. never felt air that burned their lungs. 3 men died of illness before they reached Cape Cod. Not African, 2 English sailors and 1 Scotsman. But the cold was hard on everyone. By late March, they approached New England waters. Bellamy was excited. His crew later reported, the 2 survivors, that he talked constantly about Maria. About the house he'd buy. About the life they'd build. He was 28 years old. He'd been a pirate for 16 months. He was ready to retire. April 26, 1717. Off Wellfleet, Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Weather reports from Boston described unusual conditions. A late-season nor'easter. These storms were common in winter, rare in spring. This one came without warning. The Whydah was sailing in fog. Thick fog. The kind where you couldn't see the bow from the stern. Bellamy was navigating by memory and dead reckoning. He'd sailed these waters before, back when he was a legitimate sailor courting Maria. Around 10 p.m., the wind picked up. By 11 p.m., it was a full gale. By midnight, it was a nor'easter. Winds 70 miles per hour. Maybe 80. Waves 30 feet high. The Whydah was heavy, loaded with treasure and supplies. In calm seas, this gave it stability. In a storm, it made it sluggish. Bellamy tried to sail away from shore. But he couldn't see the shore. The fog was total. The darkness was complete. The storm was everywhere. At 12:15 a.m., approximately, the exact time is disputed, the Whydah hit a sandbar at full speed. The impact was catastrophic. The ship's back broke instantly. The hull split. Water rushed into the hold where 30,000 pounds in treasure sat in chests. The mainmast snapped. The ship rolled onto its side. Men were thrown overboard. Some into the ocean. Some onto the deck. Some trapped below as the ship went down. It sank in minutes. 146 men aboard. 146 men in the water. April in the Atlantic off Massachusetts. Water temperature, 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Survival time, 30 minutes maximum. Most couldn't swim. This was common. Sailors didn't learn to swim. If you fell overboard at sea, you died anyway. Why prolong it? They wore heavy clothing. Wool coats, boots, pistols, swords. All of it pulled them down. The waves were 30 feet high. Pitch black. Storm raging. Coast somewhere nearby but invisible in the darkness. They drowned. Sam Bellamy drowned. 28 years old. All his treasure sinking beneath him. All his plans gone. Maria Hallett less than 10 miles away on shore. He never saw her again. His body was never recovered. The African pirates drowned. All 42 of them. Men who'd been enslaved, freed, made equal, taught to sail, given hope. 2 months of freedom. Then death in freezing water off a coast they'd never heard of. 144 men total. Dead in 30 minutes. 2 survived. Thomas Davis. The ship's carpenter. He'd been forced to join, captured from another ship and made to work under threat. He clung to wreckage. A piece of the mainmast. Waves pushed him to shore. He washed up on Wellfleet Beach at dawn, half dead from cold. John Julian. The ship's pilot. Possibly mixed-race Mosquito Indian. Possibly the best swimmer on board. He made it to shore somehow. Survived. Was later captured and sold into slavery. Died in slavery. The man who helped navigate a ship that freed slaves died a slave himself. The irony was complete. The next morning, April 27, 1717, residents of Wellfleet found the beach covered in wreckage. Wood, rope, canvas, chests, and bodies. 102 bodies washed ashore over the next week. 42 never surfaced, taken by the ocean or buried in sand. The townspeople buried them in a mass grave. No distinction between white pirates and black pirates. No separation by race or rank. Equal in death as they'd been equal in life, at least on Bellamy's ship. Some residents salvaged treasure from the beach. Coins. Jewelry. The authorities tried to stop them but couldn't guard the entire shoreline. Estimates suggest perhaps 2,000 pounds was recovered. The rest, 28,000 pounds or more, sank with the ship. Newspapers reported the wreck. Pirate ship lost off Cape Cod. Notorious pirate Bellamy drowned. The stories mentioned the treasure, the size of the crew, the violence of the storm. None mentioned the African pirates. None mentioned that Bellamy had freed slaves. None mentioned the integrated crew. That story was lost. What if Bellamy had taken the vote? What if, on September 5, 1717, he'd accepted the 93-87 decision, sold the enslaved people, taken the 2,000 pounds, continued as usual? Those 112 people would have been sold in Jamaica, would have lived, if you can call it living, as slaves, would have worked plantations, would have died in servitude, but they would have lived, at least for a while. The 34 who joined Bellamy's crew would have remained enslaved, would never have experienced 2 months of freedom, would never have voted on ship decisions, would never have been equal. But they wouldn't have drowned off Cape Cod. Bellamy would still have 30,000 pounds, would still have sailed north, would still have hit the same storm. The Whydah would still have sunk. But 144 men would have died instead of 146. Is 2 lives worth the principle? Is 2 months of freedom worth death at the end? Did those 34 African pirates, in their last moments, in freezing water, drowning in darkness, regret joining? Did they wish they'd taken the boats back to shore? Did they die thinking, I was free, or I should have chosen safety? We'll never know. What if Bellamy hadn't sailed north? What if he'd stayed in the Caribbean? Stayed where it was warm, where the prizes were, where his African crew wouldn't freeze. He'd still be pirating in April 1717, still capturing ships, still accumulating wealth. The Royal Navy was hunting him. Governor Woodes Rogers had declared war on pirates. Bellamy would have been caught eventually, hanged. His crew hanged with him. The African pirates would have hanged too, equal in death again, but this time by execution. Or what if he'd retired in the Caribbean, took his 30,000 pounds, bought a plantation, settled down? He'd have lived, died old, wealthy. But he'd have abandoned Maria, the whole reason he became a pirate. And he'd have been a hypocrite, the revolutionary who became the rich man he despised. Or what if he'd sent word ahead to Maria, arranged to meet somewhere safe, avoided the storm? But pirates didn't send letters. Letters could be intercepted, could reveal locations, could get you caught. He sailed to Cape Cod because surprise was safety, and it killed him. What if the storm hadn't come? What if April 26, 1717 had been calm, clear skies, gentle winds? Bellamy would have anchored off Cape Cod, would have gone ashore, would have found Maria. Except Maria was pregnant by another man. Bellamy's child, conceived before he left, had been born and died. Maria had moved on. Her parents had found her a suitable husband. She'd married in 1716. Bellamy would have learned this, would have realized the 2 years of piracy, the 30,000 pounds, the voyage north. All of it was for nothing. What would he have done? Some accounts say Maria was waiting for him, that she'd refused to marry, that she died alone, grief-stricken, when news of the wreck reached her. These accounts are romantic but unverified. More likely, she'd moved on. She was 17 when Bellamy left, 19 when he died. In 1717, that was old enough to marry someone else. Someone suitable. Someone present. If Bellamy had survived the storm, he'd have lost her anyway. The storm almost didn't matter. The wreckage sat undisturbed for 267 years. Wellfleet locals knew the story. Pirate ship wrecked here. but the exact location was lost. The treasure was assumed gone, salvaged in 1717 or scattered by centuries of tides. Barry Clifford, an underwater explorer, grew up hearing the tales. In 1982, he decided to search. He studied tidal patterns, storm tracks, historical records, survivors' testimonies. He narrowed the location to a 2-mile stretch of coast. In July 1984, his team found cannons, then coins, then the ship's bell. The bell was engraved, the Whydah Gally 1716. It was Bellamy's ship. Over the next 40 years, Clifford's team recovered incredible artifacts. Over 100,000 coins, Spanish pieces of 8, British crowns, Portuguese gold, jewelry, weapons, pistols with ornate handles, swords, grenades, personal items, belt buckles, buttons, shoes, silk stockings, and bones. Human remains scattered among the wreckage. Skulls, ribs, femurs, mixed with treasure. A man's leg bones next to a pile of silver coins. A skull near a pistol. The bones were never identified. DNA testing wasn't done. Too expensive, too complicated, no living relatives to compare. But forensic analysis suggested the remains came from men of varying ages, varying heights. Some bones showed evidence of hard labor, stress fractures, arthritis, the kind of damage sailors got. Some bones were likely African. The forensics couldn't prove it definitively, but bone structure suggested different ancestry. They'd been buried together for 267 years. White pirates and black pirates, equal in death, mixed in the sand, indistinguishable except to experts. The treasure was catalogued, authenticated, valued. Estimates range from $100 to $400 million in today's money. Most is in the Whydah Pirate Museum in West Yarmouth, Massachusetts. You can see the coins Bellamy died for, the pistols his crew carried, the belt buckle some anonymous pirate wore. The African pirate's possessions are mixed in, unlabeled, unidentified, equal. Clifford estimates 30 to 40% of the wreck remains buried, still under sand, still waiting. September 5, 1717. The vote was taken. 93 for selling, 87 for freeing. Bellamy offered his fortune. The vote changed. 147 for freeing. It was the right decision morally. The principled decision. The decision that made Bellamy legendary. It killed everyone. If they'd sold the enslaved people, the timeline changes slightly but not much. The Whydah still sinks. Bellamy still drowns. But those 34 African pirates who joined his crew, who experienced 2 months of freedom, equality, and respect, they'd be alive. Enslaved, but alive. Instead, they died free. Is that better? The question has no answer. What we know for certain. On September 5, 1717, Sam Bellamy freed 112 enslaved people off the coast of West Africa. He offered 34 of them equality on his pirate ship. They accepted. They joined his crew. They voted on decisions. They fought in battles. They were paid the same as white crew members. For 2 months, they lived as free men and women. On April 26, 1717, they drowned in the Atlantic Ocean off Cape Cod, Massachusetts. All of them. Along with Sam Bellamy. Along with 102 other pirates. Equal in death. Their bones lay mixed together under sand for 267 years. When they were found, no one could tell which bones belonged to which men. White or black. Officer or sailor. It didn't matter anymore. The ship that had been built to enslave people became their path to freedom. And their grave. Some historians argue Bellamy's decision was practical, not moral. Pirates needed crew. Freed slaves were grateful, loyal, and motivated. It was smart business. But the vote happened. 93 men wanted to sell. They saw the business value in selling, not freeing. Bellamy had to sacrifice his fortune to change their minds. That's not practical. That's principle. Other historians argue the story is exaggerated, that maybe only a few African crew members joined, that the integrated crew idea is romantic myth. But the Whydah's artifacts include items from multiple cultures. African beads mixed with European coins. Weapons of different styles. The survivors' testimonies, both Thomas Davis and John Julian, mentioned diverse crew members and men of several nations. The evidence supports integration. The question that haunts the story: did Bellamy do the right thing? He freed people who'd been enslaved. He offered them equality in a world that wouldn't do so for another 150 years. He sacrificed his wealth for his principles. And it killed them. If the choice is slavery versus 2 months of freedom followed by death, which is better? If you're the person choosing, you take freedom. Every time. 2 months of dignity beats a lifetime of chains. If you're looking back from history, knowing the outcome, it's harder. Bellamy couldn't have known about the storm. Couldn't have predicted April 26, 1717 would be the night a nor'easter hit Cape Cod. Couldn't have known the Whydah would hit that specific sandbar at that specific angle. He made the moral choice with incomplete information. That's all anyone can do. April 26, 1717. Around midnight. The Whydah's hull split open. Water rushed in. The ship rolled. Men fell into the ocean. Among them, 34 African pirates who 2 months earlier had been enslaved. Who'd been freed by a white pirate who believed in equality. Who'd chosen to stay. Who'd learned to sail. Who'd voted on ship decisions. Who'd fought alongside white crew members. Who'd been paid the same. Treated the same. Respected the same. They hit the water. Freezing. Dark. Waves everywhere. Did they think about the alternative? About the boats back to shore they could have taken? About the safety of slavery versus the risk of freedom? Or did they think, I chose this. I chose freedom. I chose the ocean. I chose risk over chains. Or maybe they didn't think at all. Maybe they just tried to swim, to breathe, to survive. One by one, they went under. The cold took them. The waves took them. The ocean took them. They died as pirates, as free men and women, as equals. Their bodies washed ashore alongside Sam Bellamy's crew, buried together. No separation. The Whydah Pirate Museum has a display about the African crew members. It's small, tucked in a corner. Most visitors miss it. It shows a few artifacts that might have belonged to them. There's no way to know for sure. It explains Bellamy's decision to free them. It mentions the vote. It doesn't answer the question of whether it was worth it. How could it? Barry Clifford, the man who found the wreck, was asked in an interview, "Do you think Bellamy regretted his decision? In those last moments, drowning, did he wish he'd sold them?" Clifford thought for a long time. "I think he died believing he did the right thing. I think that's all anyone can hope for." September 5, 1717. The vote was taken. The decision was made. Sam Bellamy freed 112 people. 34 joined his crew. They sailed together for 2 months. They lived as equals. April 26, 1717. The Whydah sank. 146 people drowned, including all 34 African pirates. They were doomed from September 5, 1717. They just didn't know it yet.